Hello, good morning, and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. These are the topics that we shall be discussing today. Let's get started and look at article number 1, limit and access. Creamy layer should be kept out, but the ceiling on quota is artificial, says the Hindu editorial. What is the context? The Bihar government last year enhanced the reservation for some marginalized communities, for backward classes, extremely backward classes, SCs and STs, and this took the total reservation to 65% in Bihar. And now the Patna High Court has declared that this increase in reservation, which has expanded and stretched beyond 50%, is unconstitutional. Because you would know that Indira Sani judgment in 1992 put a cap on reservation. Reservation cannot exceed beyond 50% unless and until there are exceptional, compelling circumstances. Let's understand this newspaper article in great detail, and for that we need to understand what is Article 15 of the Constitution. Article 15 imposes a limitation on the state, that what state cannot do, it cannot discriminate against its citizens, only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. Caste is an important factor here. The state shall not discriminate, cannot discriminate only on the grounds of caste. Something happened. The year was 1951 or 1950, when the then Madras government issued an order, and through that order Madras government wanted to provide reservation to SCs and STs in government engineering and medical colleges. Matter went to the court. A landmark case known as Champak Dorai Rajan versus State of Madras. Some of you who have already attended my classes, they are aware of what this is, but maybe there are a large number of students who are attending this session for the first time, who have no idea about the static portion of the syllabus. For them, I'm explaining this topic in great detail because that is how you can understand this editorial. If you have already understood this, then you can skip this video. But the point is, if Article 15 says there shall be no discrimination only on the grounds of caste, and in 1950 Madras government is issuing an order saying we will provide reservation to SCs and STs, basically caste groups, in government engineering and medical colleges. This was challenged in the court, Champak Dorai Rajan versus State of Madras. Supreme Court asked, how can you do this? How can you discriminate only on the grounds of caste? The Madras government said, we are implementing Article 46 of the Constitution, which is part of the directive principles of state policy, where this directive principle imposes a positive obligation, a duty on the state, that you have to take steps so that the social condition, the economic condition of SCs and STs is enhanced. Madras government said, since we are trying to implement Article 46 of the Constitution, that is why we have enacted this policy. And the Supreme Court said this Madras government order is unconstitutional. Why unconstitutional? Because it violates fundamental rights under Article 15 of the Constitution. And since directive principles are inferior to fundamental rights, it is fundamental rights which shall prevail. Then what happened? Parliament amended the Constitution, and because of that constitutional amendment, reservation was extended to those who are socially and educationally backward. And then over a period of time, this reservation for SCs and STs in educational institutions, this got further enlarged. So reservation was provided to SCs, then it again for STs, then it was extended for the OBCs, other backward caste classes. Initially, this reservation was for government educational institutions. Then this reservation got extended to private educational institutions. Whether these private educational institutions are aided or unaided institutions. And the only type of institution which was kept out of the reservation system was a minority educational institute under Article 30 of the Constitution. So, long story short, is there reservation for marginalized communities in educational institutions? Yes. For SCs, for STs, for OBCs. In government institutions, in private institutions. Within private institutions, in those institutions which are receiving aid, funding from the state. And even in those institutions which are not receiving aid from the state, unaided educational institutions. And the only category of institutions which have been kept out of this reservation system are the minority educational institutions under Article 30 of the Constitution. And then the year was 2019 when this reservation got extended to EWS category as well, economically weaker sections of the society as well. And that's how under 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act, 10% seats in educational institutions are to be reserved for economically weaker sections of the society. Clear? Similarly, we need to understand what is Article 16 of the Constitution. It again imposes a limitation on the state that you cannot discriminate against any citizen when you are providing public employment, when you are providing government jobs, only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, descent, so on and so forth. That means on the grounds of caste, there can be no discrimination whatsoever. But right from the enactment of the Constitution, from 26 January 1940, we have had Article 16, Clause 4. And since the commencement of the Constitution, there used to be reservation in government jobs. For whom? For SCs and STs. But then something happened. Based on the recommendations of the Mandal Commission, the Janata Party government in the 1970s, after the emergency, set up a commission under BP Mandal, a politician from Bihar, asking the commission to identify who are socially and educationally backward. Saying we know SCs and STs are socially and educationally backward. Apart from that, are there other communities in India who are also socially and educationally backward? Identify them. And then Mandal Commission said close to 52% of the population, apart from SCs and STs, they are socially and educationally backward. And we recommend a reservation for them. And reservation can be 27%. Janata Party could not implement this. Then came Srimati Indira Gandhi, she also sat on this report. Then came Rajiv Gandhi, he also sat on this report. And then came VP Singh, Vishwanath Pratap Singh, who implemented Mandal Commission report, and ultimately reservation was provided in government jobs for OBCs. And this reservation policy for OBCs was challenged in the Supreme Court in a landmark case known as Indra Sani versus Union of India, 1992. And this case is also known as the Mandal case. But you would know, VP Singh lost power after this report sometime later, and then came PV Narasimha Rao as the Prime Minister, and PV Narasimha Rao decided that apart from OBC reservation, we will provide 10% reservation to poor as well, to those who come from the poor background. All this was challenged in the Supreme Court in Indra Sani versus Union of India. And Supreme Court said, number one, reservation for poor is unconstitutional. Why is it unconstitutional? Because Constitution recognizes backwardness of only two kinds. Either you should be socially backward or you should be educationally backward. Economic backwardness is not a criteria for providing reservation. Supreme Court further said this reservation can be only at the time of entry. Only at the time of the recruitment. This reservation cannot be at the time of the promotion. So reservation in promotion is unconstitutional. Reservation at the time of the entry is constitutional. But so far as this OBC reservation is concerned, this is allowed, this we will allow, this is constitutional, but subject to 5 requirements, subject to 5 conditions. If you meet these 5 conditions, reservation for OBCs in public employment, in government jobs is constitutional. And which are these 5 criteria? Number 1, you have to prove that they are socially and educationally backward. Sir, what does that mean? That basically means there has to be something called a survey. How will you identify who are the socially and educationally backward class of citizens? On what criteria? It can't be the Prime Minister waking up one fine morning and deciding that we will provide reservation to these groups of people. It has to be based on statistics, based on data, based on survey, based on a commission. So you have to set up a commission, and that commission will lay down guidelines, criteria, on the basis of which you will identify who are socially and educationally backward. And not just that, these socially and educationally backward class of citizens, in the opinion of state, should not be adequately represented. These 2 points are very important. These 2 points were cited by the Patna High Court in declaring the Bihar reservation or enhanced reservation law as unconstitutional. First, you have to convince us that these communities for which you are providing reservation, they are socially and educationally backward. How? For that you have to conduct a survey. For that you have to set up a commission. And this commission will lay down guidelines, criteria on the basis of which you are identifying socially and educationally backward class of citizens. Second, in the opinion of the state, these backward communities are not adequately represented. And what is this adequate representation? I'll come to it slightly later. See, creamy layer shall apply. And what is this creamy layer? Not for SCs and STs, but for OBCs. Because we are questioning reservation for OBCs in Indira Sahni case. In Indira Sahni case, reservation for SCs and STs was not challenged because that was going on since the commencement of the constitution. It was extending this reservation to OBCs that opened the can of worms, and ultimately matter went to the court. Prove to us that they are socially and educationally backward. Second, they should not be adequately represented in the administration. Third, creamy layer shall apply. That means within these OBCs, you have to identify those who are part of the creamy layer, those who are part of the non-creamy layer. Right now, for example, the criteria is if your annual household income is 8 lakhs, above 8 lakhs, you are part of creamy layer. If your annual income, father's income is less than 8 lakh, you are part of the non-creamy layer. And if you are part of the non-creamy layer, you will be provided reservation. That means creamy layer shall be excluded, non-creamy layer shall be included in the reservation policy. Fourth, reservation shall not exceed 50%. That means reservation for SC plus ST plus OBC put together, this cannot exceed beyond 50%, except in compelling circumstances, in extraordinary circumstances. And the fifth criteria is Article 335, which is a subjective clause. And what is that subjective clause? This reservation is possible, provided you don't flirt with the merit. Merit should never be compromised, because you cannot compromise with the efficiency in administration. The bar to recruit these people should not be so low that you're recruiting incompetent people, which will ultimately drag down the efficiency in administration. That we will not allow. If you meet these five criteria, reservation for OBCs is constitutional. But now, when it comes to matters such as reservation, I need to extend my slide. In such matters such as reservation, what Supreme Court is normally doing, it is practicing something called strict scrutiny. What is this strict scrutiny? When EWS reservation was provided in 2019 by 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act, matter was challenged before the court, before the Supreme Court. And last year in 2023, the Supreme Court said this EWS reservation is constitutional, right? But that EWS reservation extended the overall total reservation beyond 50%. Why was that constitutional? There was no survey conducted. There was no survey conducted to identify economically weaker sections of the society. Was there a survey conducted to identify who are these socially and educationally backward classes of citizens? Who are these economically weaker sections of the society? No. In Bihar's case specifically, there was a caste survey done. Despite this caste survey, which tells us about the socio and educational standard of the communities, the Patna High Court is saying, no, this reservation which exceeds 50% is unconstitutional. So look at the contrast. EWS reservation without a survey. Increase in the Bihar reservation with survey. You might also think that it points out to the way this survey was carried out by the Bihar government. But nevertheless, the survey was carried out. And despite that survey, which identified these socially and educationally backward class of citizens, you are not allowing enhancement of reservation. Second, in the opinion of the state, these communities should not be adequately represented. What Patna High Court is saying, listen to me carefully, this is a very, very important point. Adequate representation is not same as proximate reservation. Or what is known as proportionate representation, which is true. You have to convince the court that those socially and educationally backward classes of citizens for which we want to provide reservation, enhanced reservation, they're not adequately represented in the administration. But adequate representation does not mean proximate reservation, this proportionate reservation. And what is this proportionate reservation? This proportionate reservation is there for reservation in Lok Sabha, in legislative assemblies, in urban local bodies, in Panchayati Raj institutions. Members belonging to SC and ST community. Seats shall be reserved in Panchayati Raj institutions, municipalities for SCs and STs in proportion to their population. That means if your population is 20%, 20% seats shall be reserved. That does not mean that this proportionate reservation we will extend to jobs as well, to educational institutions as well. That does not mean if your population is 60%, you will get 60% reservation. We only have to look at whether you are adequately represented or not. Even if you are represented adequately, may not be in proportionate to your population, that doesn't mean you are backward. But dear Patna High Court, Bihar government was not following proportionate reservation, because according to this caste survey conducted by the Bihar government, 84.46% of the population in Bihar belongs to SCs, STs, backward classes, extremely backward classes. So if Bihar government was following proportionate reservation, they should have extended this reservation to 84%. They would not have stopped at 65%. On this ground, the Patna High Court's order has been criticized. But something else. Even can you exceed beyond 50%? Yes, but in exceptional circumstances. The Patna High Court should have accepted the compelling circumstances, the exceptional circumstances with respect to Bihar. Why? Because Bihar is different. And it makes sense to exceed reservation beyond 50% because there are compelling circumstances with respect to Bihar. Why Bihar? Because for the last 2 decades, yes, they have made a lot of progress. The state of Bihar has made a lot of progress in terms of law and order, in terms of state GDP as well. The state GDP is growing better than the national average. They have made good strides, improvements when it comes to infant mortality rate, when it comes to electricity, when it comes to sanitation. But even then, Bihar is lagging. It's like your father and you. Last year you scored 90 marks. This year you scored 91 marks. It is an improvement, but your father will not be satisfied. You should have scored 98 because that's the expectation from you. And imagine you're the father and last year you failed the examination. And now this time you have scored 40. You have passed the examination. There will be euphoria. There will be celebration at your house. Why? Because the expectation was that you will fail. Now you have passed. So Bihar has done well, but you have to understand from what level. They were so backward that any improvement will look massive improvement, but you still will have to meet the national criteria. There will be celebration at your home. Pappu pass ho gaya. But Sharma ji ka beta has scored 92. That's the difference. If you look at Bihar today, if an average Indian is earning 10 rupees per day, an average Bihari is earning only 3. If you look at 2021 Niti Ayog's multidimensional poverty index, 51% of the population in Bihar is poor. If you look at Bihar, more than half of the population is engaged in agriculture. And this agriculture contributes only 25% to the Bihar's state GDP. So these are exceptional circumstances where we can say that Bihar is not part of the national mainstream. It is kept at a distance. And these compelling circumstances should have given a sense to the judiciary that you can exceed reservation beyond 50% because these are compelling circumstances. That is why when it comes to such matters, the court performs strict scrutiny. When it comes to reservation for Patidars in Gujarat, when it comes to the reservation for Marathas in Maharashtra, when it comes to Jats, when it comes to Gujars, for these communities, the Supreme Court is always prescribing strict scrutiny of these policies. But when the same policy was expanded when it comes to economically weaker sections of the society, Supreme Court said the Parliament can amend the Constitution and prescribe another ground for reservation. So previously, if the Constitution recognized social and educational backwardness, nothing stops the Parliament from prescribing additional grounds of backwardness, which can be economic backwardness. So different yardstick. For some marginalized communities, the courts are only focused on merit. But in other cases, it is focusing on social and educational backwardness. Long story short, Patna High Court has declared that the reservation policy in Bihar which increased the total reservation in Bihar to 65%, is unconstitutional. Why? Because it violates the 50% cap. Supreme Court is, and in series of judgments has said, right against arbitrariness is a fundamental right under Article 14 of the Constitution. So decisions cannot be arbitrary. But my lord, your limit of 50% is arbitrary. And that's what the Hindu also says in its editorial. It is artificial. Why do you want to limit the reservation to 50%? Why not 40? Why not 60? Why not 70? Why not 20? There has to be a rational justification of why you have kept, why is there a cap on reservation at 50%? Why nothing more than that, nothing less than that? This is artificial. And it needs to be re-looked into. If the massive amount of our population belongs to socially and educationally backward, there is a time to revisit this 50% cap. And at the same time, this Hindu editorial says creamy layer should be kept out, but ceiling on quota is artificial. But there is also a counter argument saying reservation was never meant to be a poverty alleviation program or a poverty alleviation scheme, that we will provide reservation and then these socially and educationally backward class of citizens, they will come out of poverty. No. Reservation is to correct the historic wrongs of injustice which was committed to the members of the SC and ST community right since the time immemorial. So if you want to uplift a community, uplift a social group from poverty, give them scholarship, give them benefits, give them access to good quality education through various means. But a reservation is only to correct the historic wrongs of injustice. This is the question that I put out for your mains practice. Write an answer to this. And then let's look at article number 2. Parliament's changed bench strength spells more hope. Parliament will be convened today, the 18th Lok Sabha. The Speaker pro tem will administer oath to the newly elected MPs, starting with the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers. Now, what happened in the past and what might happen in the future, this is where the author has a lot of hope. Because in the past, the strength of the opposition, the numerical strength of the opposition was so poor that they would get drowned in the noise coming from the treasury benches, noise coming from the government side inside the parliament. But now with the strength of close to 232, the opposition has a voice. With a strength of about 300, close to 300, the government will also have its way, but opposition will have its say. And that is how democracy should be. Opposition should have its say. They should be allowed to say whatever they want to say, but ultimately it's the government which should have its way, because after all, they have the mandate to run the country. Previously, what used to happen? According to this article, bills were not being sent to the select committees. Bills were being passed without debate. Bills were being rushed through inside the parliament. And now this article says the author is hopeful that this will not be the case. The hope is that now there will be lots and lots of consultation. The bills will be referred to the select committee. Also, there have been instances where if notice was sent to the speaker that we want to introduce an adjournment motion, that was not accepted by the chair. We have also had instances where if the members of the parliament would seek answers from the Prime Minister would not reply. There was a time when after a Prime Minister would come back from a foreign visit, He will brief the parliament, he will address the parliament, what exactly did I achieve in these foreign visits? That has not happened during the prime ministership of Mr. Modi. And that is what the author says, there is a hope this might change. Parliament again will become a medium for debate, discussion, dissent. But how exactly Parliament functions as an institution, we will only have to wait and watch. That is why some people say now we have a new Parliament. That means the hardware is new. But it's the software which will determine whether Parliament as an institution continues to be an important place for debate, discussion, dissent. Because if it continues in the new Parliament that members will be expelled, members will be suspended, motions will not be relied upon, because how many times in Rajya Sabha notice under Rule 163 was given to the Vice President, to the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. But no such notice was even accepted. The last time a notice under Rule 163 was accepted, Rule 163 is a rule which is part of the Rajya Sabha's proceedings, wherein a member can ask the chairperson that you suspend what we are going to discuss. Let's have a discussion on this matter of very public importance. There will be a debate, there will be a discussion on that. This rule was never invoked during the vice presidentship of the current vice president as well as the previous vice president. The last time it happened was when Hamid Ansari was the vice president of India. It never happened during the 5 years of the term of Mr. Venkaiah Naidu when he was the vice president. So maybe with this increase in the strength of the opposition, the changed bench strength spells more hope, according to this Delhi-based senior journalist K.V. Prasad. Clear? Whether it happens or not, we'll have to wait and watch. Let's look at another important article, Indian Railways and Safety Challenges. And this is in continuation to the discussion we had yesterday, with just one minor update that I will have to provide, and then we are done with this. If you have not followed or watched yesterday's analysis, please go through the portion where I am discussing. There was a goods train which was running at a high speed. It hit a train, Kanchenjunga Express, led to the deaths of 11 people, injuries to more than 40, which could have been averted. Why? Because most of the accidents in India, rail accidents in India, train accidents in India, are caused due to human errors or human failure. In this case also, human failure may have resulted in this accident. But if you look at in India, we take consolation, saying that now the train accidents are reducing. Only 10 deaths. Last time only 100 deaths. Prior to that, we haven't witnessed a large number of train accidents. So train accidents have reduced to a large extent. But when it comes to the rest of the world, they have ensured that these train accidents are at zero. Because this is a viable goal, objective, to reduce train accidents to zero. Because once you exclude human failure, once you ensure strict rules, regulations, implementations, it is an attainable goal to have zero train accidents. And for that, we need to recruit more. Railways as an institution is overly staffed institution. But when it comes to the drivers, loco drivers, there are 18,000 vacancies. That we need to fill on an urgent basis. That's something that we discussed yesterday. And yesterday I also told you about Kavach, developed by Indian Railways along with Research Defence Standards Organization. And if this Kavach was installed in this particular case, between the two stations where we saw this impact between the goods train and the passenger train, if Kavach would have been installed, then this goods train, which was which was speeding, emergency automatic brake would have been imposed and ultimately the damage would have been done away with. But that Kavach was not installed on this route or on this train. Why? Because of lack of vendors, and that's something that we discussed yesterday. And in fact, it is because of this lack of vendors that Kavach has been installed only along the 15,000 kilometers of railway line in India. But the railways in India span close to 68,000 kilometers. That means we have a long way to go. And if, that's the point I have to make now, if Kavach was not installed, which could have averted this crisis, and Kavach was not installed because of lack of vendors, right? Then why don't we also look at the alternative? And the alternative in this case is European train control system. Which is also similar to Kavach, although with much better advancements, such as something that we see in Japan as well. So if because of lack of vendors, we are not able to install Kavach along the 68,000 kilometer of railway line, why don't we explore the alternative, which is ETCS? And this also speaks volumes about the failure of the Indian railways. That you have a demand for Kavach, but you are not fueling this demand. You are not generating interest among the private players to ensure that this Kavach is designed and manufactured at massive scale so that we can cover all the 68,000 kilometers. That speaks volumes about your failure to elicit interest among the private player. That you should have done. And at the same time, look and explore for alternatives such as ETCS. That's what we need to understand from this topic, Indian Railways and safety challenges. Let's look at another column, explainer, what are the duties of the speaker. There is one correction I have to make here, and after that you know this topic. We have had some controversy on the speaker pro tem. And day before yesterday, the first topic that we discussed, I explained the office of Speaker Pro Tem in great detail, right? And this part talks about Speaker Pro Tem. But first thing, I told you then as well that the Speaker does not resign. Speaker is one entity who remains in office and resigns on the first day of the session of the newly elected MPs, which means Mr. Om Birla will have resigned now. Because today the parliament is meeting. The speaker pro tem would have been administered oath by the president at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And now the speaker pro tem will administer oath to other newly elected MPs. But at the same time, when we look at the speaker's post, how are the speaker and the deputy speaker elected? Constitution says the House shall elect two of its members. One as the speaker, the other as the deputy speaker, as soon as may be. And now, according to newspaper reports, the office of the speaker, there will be an election to the office of the speaker on the 26th of June. After that, because this date will be set up by the president will prescribe the date of the election of the speaker. But after the speaker has been elected, now the speaker will prescribe the date of the election of the deputy speaker. And according to this article, the deputy speaker is normally from the opposition, and this convention started way back in the 11th Lok Sabha, or since the year 1991, but this is not entirely true. Why? Because the process or this convention, although there were breaks in this convention, but this convention started way back in 1956 when the then Prime Minister Pandit Nehru proposed the name of Sardar Hukum Singh. Sardar Hukum Singh was in the opposition. He was the member of the parliament, member of the Lok Sabha from Kapurthala Bhatinda constituency of Punjab. He was the member of the Shiromani Akali Dal. Previously was also the president of the Shiromani Akali Dal. And as the member of the opposition, since the speaker was from the ruling party, the deputy speaker's post was given to the opposition member, was proposed to the opposition member by Pandit Nehru. So that was when the convention normally started. But it is this speaker's post which has come under a lot of criticism. And something that we have discussed in the past as well. I'll quickly read down what points are mentioned in this article and then we are done with this. One, it says that the speaker performs two important roles. One is certifying a bill as a money bill. And what bill is a money bill? A bill which meets the conditions under Article 110. Constitution says that once the speaker certifies a bill as a money bill, this certificate is final. But we have seen that even this certification by the speaker has been challenged in the court. And that matter is pending before the court. Because was Aadhaar rightfully introduced as a money bill? Were some changes that were made to the service conditions of tribunals which got changed because of the Finance Act of 2018? Was that constitutional? Was that right to be introduced as a money bill? That matter, that petition is pending before the court. And speaker takes decision on the grounds of disqualification under anti-defection law, under 10th schedule. And this has also come under a lot of criticism in the past. Not at the speaker of the Lok Sabha level, but at the speaker of the Legislative Assembly level. What happened in Maharashtra? But at the same time, there has been a convention, or there should have been a convention, that the speaker, once you're elected, you should resign from your political party. And even if you resign from your political party, you will not attract the provisions of anti-defection law. Because under anti-defection law, once you're elected, if you resign from your party, you will be disqualified. You can be disqualified. But the exception is, if you are a speaker, if you have been elected as a speaker, and you resign from your political party after the speaker's election, you will not be disqualified. And that is how you can appear impartial before the members of the parliament. But this has never happened. No speaker has resigned from his political party after the election as the speaker of the Lok Sabha. Although we saw one instance in 2008 when Shri Somnath Chatterjee was the speaker of the Lok Sabha. He belonged to the Communist Party. But Communist Party withdrew support to the Congress UPA government when Indo-US nuclear deal was about to be signed between the two countries. And communists, they are always anti-United States. That is their ideology. That is their position. But Mr. Somnath Chatterjee did not resign as the speaker. He continued to remain the speaker during the entire term. So we need independent, non-partisan, honest speakers to preside over Lok Sabha and maintain the dignity of this office. Clear? One correction, it was Sardar Hukum Singh in 1956. Although later on the convention got solidified from 1991. Let's look at another topic. How is methanol procured and used as liquor? Something happened. Close to 50 lives have been lost in Tamil Nadu. And what is the cause? All these people consumed illicit liquor. And the reason for their death is methanol consumption or methanol poisoning. Clear? Let's understand this newspaper article in great detail. We have ethanol and we have methanol. These are two kinds of alcohol. Ethanol, CH3CH2OH, CH3OH. And as you can see, in ethanol there are two carbon units. But in methanol, there is one carbon unit. This ethanol is edible. It is part of liquor that you consume, so you can drink it. But it is this methanol which is a poison and should never be ingested. How is this ethanol produced, or how is this methanol produced? Ethanol is produced through biological processes, through normal processes. For example, fermentation process. And this fermentation process of sugar, for which we use yeast. And where is the sugar coming from? The sugar can come from rice, it can come from wheat, it can come from barley, it can come from basically any food product where it contains cellulose, it contains any sugar which contains starch, or it contains cellulose. And this is how ethanol through fermentation process is produced. When we use this process of fermentation involving sugar, involving yeast, and this sugar you can get from rice, wheat, barley, corn as well, or for that matter any food article where sugar is present, whether in the form of starch or cellulose. Clear? This methanol is produced on an industrial scale. On an industrial scale, and this methanol is primarily, now you would say if this is poison, so why is it produced? It is produced in paint making industries. So methanol also has its own uses. It's not a useless thing. But when it comes to, for example, this is sugar cane, and you're crushing sugar cane in a sugar mill to manufacture sugar, right? What is the byproduct? Molasses. Normally you would have witnessed that when there is a sugar mill, in the close vicinity, you also have a distillery. What is this distillery? Where the alcoholic drinks are manufactured, are made. So these molasses, which is a byproduct in the sugar making industry, from the sugar mills, these molasses are fed to distillery. And then because of distillation, you manufacture spirit. Then with further distillation, you manufacture ethanol. And it is this ethanol which is used for Indian made foreign liquor, IMFL. And it is this IMFL which is one of the most important sources of revenue for the state. Clear? But then sometimes what happens, not sometimes, almost all the times, through this distillation process, methanol is also generated. But these distilleries, what do? They carefully exclude and remove methanol. But sometimes what happens? This methanol is not removed from this alcoholic drink, and that is what gets consumed by the people. So basically this distillery is making illicit liquor, not excluding, not removing methanol. Methanol is a poison. If you ingest methanol, you will die. It's a poison, and that is what happened. But not just that. Methanol is relatively cheaper as compared to ethanol. And some say, or why some say, it's a chemical property. Methanol is more soluble in water than ethanol. So people say if we get methanol and we dilute it more because it is more soluble in water, this gives us the same sense of liquor. And instead we get a lot of kick. It has more intoxication property as compared to ethanol. That is why there have been instances where methanol in more diluted form is given to the people as a cheap product and they consume it in place of the liquor. And that is illicit liquor, and that is how these people die. There have been experts who are saying that in India, the principal reason for such huge tragedies is the methanol consumption. Methanol always is the culprit. And this we have seen even in so-called dry states such as Bihar, such as Gujarat. So if methanol always is the culprit, then we should either focus on prevention or we should focus on treatment. How can we focus on prevention? Give access to people low-cost liquor so that they do not consume this methanol poison, which basically means prohibition is never a solution. If the state is prohibiting liquor, easy access to good quality liquor, but cheap, they will resort to illicit liquor and ultimately they will consume poison. And this has happened in Bihar, this has happened in Gujarat, the so-called dry states. So give access to cheap quality liquor, for example, made from rice, which the state can do. Give access to that cheap quality liquor. That's how you can prevent such tragedies. Or if you can't do that, because if the state will make liquor easily accessible, it is also a political blunder. Because men will come intoxicated, they start beating their spouses, they start creating drama at the home. So women community is one which is in favor of prohibition. That explains why some psephologists say Nitish Kumar gets votes from women because he has implemented prohibition. Although not effectively implemented, but he has implemented prohibition. So if you can't prevent methanol consumption, poisoning, by providing easy access to cheap liquor, then what is the other alternative? The other alternative is treatment. And the antidote to methanol consumption is ethanol. It might sound strange. So there are people who have been intoxicated, who have been poisoned by methanol consumption. One way to treat them is to give them good quality ethanol. But the mains-based question that you should practice for your writing is keeping methanol and ethanol separate and not allowing any pilferage should be a national priority. Comment. Clear? Let's look at another topic. Focus prelims. Censor board thwarts Monkey Man release even after global cuts. We have cinematograph certification rules of 2024. We have Central Board for Film Certification, which is a statutory body under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. What is the job of this CBFC, which is popularly known as the Censor Board? The job is to certify films for public viewing. And what is this certify films for public viewing? For example, there were 3 certificates provided. Universal viewing, anybody can watch this movie, there is no restriction whatsoever. A, universal adult, that means only those who are adults above the age of 18, they can watch. Initially, these were the 2 criteria, these were the 2 certificates that were provided. Then later on, S was the other certificate provided. S means this movie or this documentary can be viewed only by specialized set of people. For example, doctors. For example, if there is a documentary which is showing how the open heart surgery is done or how the stitches are given, which may not be comfortable for public viewing, especially for children. So the certificate is only for S, that means only a specialized set of people can watch this documentary or movie. And then over a period of time, we also saw another category where parental guidance was required. Parental guidance in the sense that those who are above the age of 12, who are below the age of 12, they can watch this movie but only with parents assisting them. Otherwise, no. But the cinematograph rules 2024 which were made, they added 3 more criteria. 3 more certificates. UA 7+, UA 13+, UA 16+. That means now we are talking about specific group of people. 7+ people can watch with parental guidance. 13+ individuals can watch with parental guidance. Similarly, 16+ can watch with parental guidance. But why are we discussing this? Because there is a movie, Monkey Man, starring Dev Patel. You might have seen him in Slumdog Millionaire, the movie which bagged Oscar, directed by Danny Boyle. Music by A.R. Rahman. Lyrics by Gulzar. Sung by Sukhvinder Singh. But be that as it may, this movie attracted a lot of attention because of its trailer, because of the themes that it was projecting. Theme involving nexus between politics and religion. In fact, the poster that you see on the screen has been changed. Initially, the poster color was saffron. It has now been changed to red. Although this movie has released outside, but it has not been released in India. Why? We don't know. Under rules, what CBFC does, it gives certificate. That means what CBFC will do, it will watch a movie, it will screen a movie, what is called examine a movie. And this examining is done by the examining committee. And this examining committee should watch this movie within 5 days and then issue certificate. Whether this movie is fit for UA 7+, 13+, 16+, S, so on and so forth. Or it may refuse to issue certificate. Because films draw their strength from freedom of speech and expression. Article 19(1)(a). Article 19(1)(a) is not an absolute fundamental right. There are reasonable restrictions on Article 19(1)(a). And those reasonable restrictions are mentioned under Article 19 Clause 2. Which means even here, the movie which goes against the sovereignty and integrity of India, against the security of the state, against the friendly relations with foreign states, which might instigate public order, which might be immoral or indecent, which might be contempt of court, which might be defamatory, which might incite people to violence. These are the 8 grounds on the basis of which your freedom of speech and expression can be restricted. On these grounds, CBFC, if it feels that there is a particular movie which violates any of these provisions, it may refuse to give certificate. And without the certificate, there can be no public viewing of that movie. According to the cinematograph rules of 2024, this examining committee has 5 days to watch that movie and then recommend any changes if they are required. So instead of properly banning this movie, you can suggest changes. Remove this word, remove this title. That's what happened when a movie, Hamare Bara, that movie's title was also changed on the recommendation, on the instructions of the CBFC. But in this case, an RTI application was filed by The Hindu asking CBFC, why is the examining committee not watching and reviewing this movie and issuing a certificate? That RTI was not replied to. And even that 5-day deadline, which is prescribed by Cinematograph Act, within which the examining committee has to view this movie, watch this movie, so as to issue a proper certificate, that 5-day deadline has also expired. So for this particular type of topic, understand what is CBFC, whether it's a constitutional body or a statutory body or a non-statutory extra-constitutional body, under which ministry is it part of, what is its role, what are the different certificates that it can issue, and what is the guideline for viewing these and examining these films. That is what you need to know from this particular topic. So that is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you have liked this content, understood this content, please let me know in the comment section. And also don't forget to like this video. See you again tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning. Till then, have a great time. All the best.